Hi Ivan,
Hey Yuka.
what's our topic today?
So today we're kind of talk about kind of my journey of sharpening and the stones. Not really getting into specific stones, but more my experience with the stones over these last 25 years and some of the problems I've faced and how I've solved them and kind of what I'm looking forward to moving on. So my name's Ivan Fonseca. I've been sharpening professionally for about 25 years. In around 2008, 2009, I started my own sharpening restoration business. And then 2010, with my business partner and co-founder Olivia, we started Tosho Knife Arts. Eventually, as the years went on, I moved to Japan to work with Kanashige or Konosuke Sakai as a professional sharpener and advisor. In around 2007, I'd already been sharpening a lot. I was really thinking about taking it professionally because at that time, where I lived in Toronto, there wasn't a lot of people doing the kind of work that I wanted to do. The idea and the concept that I had and how I wanted to approach sharpening was taking the level of polishing and sharpening that I saw in techniques used for Japanese swords and polishing from other industries. I wanted to bring those and incorporate those into my knife sharpening. At the time, this wasn't done anywhere, so I couldn't actually get techniques or ideas from anybody. And at that time, there was no Instagram, so you couldn't really see what anyone else was doing. So a lot of the inspiration I had at that time was based on some Japanese tools that I saw that were polished to a very high level on natural stones. And of course, Japanese swords, and also some kitchen knives that were coming from Japan, like what Tsukasa Hinora was doing on some of his kitchen knives, and a few other makers that were doing some interesting things. But on a whole, at that time, most Japanese kitchen knives were sharpened mainly on machines, and that was performance, but they looked incredible. And how I started getting into this was a lot of the knives that you see, or I had seen at that time, the finishes were either done by different techniques like sandblasting or using different powders to get the finish to make the contrast on the cladding and the hard steel. So these techniques weren't actually technically done by hand sharpening on a whetstone. But my goal was to refinishing and repairing a lot of knives was to, through hand sharpening, get back the finish that was previously on the blade from the maker and also bring it to a higher level. So as I progressed with what I was doing, refinishing and polishing and repairing a lot of the Japanese kitchen knives that I was getting, and also doing my own research into different techniques, I would always come into problems with the stones. And for me, I just wanted to focus mainly on the techniques, not the stones. Some of the problems that I would always face is that the stones were either too soft and wouldn't keep the flat surface long enough during long periods of reshaping and repairs. And another problem was that a lot of stones aren't able to actually refinish, or they can't replace their own scratch pattern, meaning that if you change the scratch direction on the same stone, it took a long time for that stone to be able to replace its own scratch. Some other problems that I face is that just the stones wouldn't give the right type of contrast I was looking for, meaning that the soft iron and the steel wouldn't be differentiated. It was always, both were very cloudy, so I couldn't get a nice mirror polish. Eventually though, I was very persistent in technique and constantly looking for new techniques. I was able to achieve some pretty good results at the time that I was happy with. For one example is some kitchen knives I was refinishing. When I looked at how they looked from the maker, you would have a really beautiful thick kasumi on the soft iron, and then the steel would be a very, very high, bright mirror polish. At the time, I knew that that wasn't done by hand, but my goal was to reproduce that look or that finish by hand. So that meant figuring out techniques with different stones to match and create that finish. Other problems I've faced were a lot of the stones were, as I mentioned earlier, they're really geared towards edge sharpening and not really polishing. So they couldn't bring out the characteristics I was looking for, which would be, for example, a mirror polished steel and at the same time a really thick kasumi cladding. I mean, and I guess in general, I was constantly wishing and thinking there's got to be solutions to these problems. I did solve a lot of those problems, but I was always thought there's got to be something better when it comes to sharpening stones. So after reintroducing myself to NSK, I was a bit skeptical on how they would work. I've been using other diamond stones, and every diamond stone was just not giving me what I wanted. Looking at NSK's lineup at the time was really, really interesting because they had a vast variety of grits and hardnesses, and the stones were meant for different types of sharpening, different types of steel, tools or knives, or high-speed steel or carbon steel, etc. So when I did actually really get into NSK and started using them a lot, it was a big, big change and completely changed my outlook and idea of sharpening in general, but also what I could achieve overall with my sharpening. So a lot of the problems that I was having before with the synthetic stones, like I talked about earlier, was NSK didn't have those problems to start with. So the stones stayed flat longer. They cut faster. I could basically control and use the stones the way I wanted to, which gave me a very predictable outcome on performance, which is what I was looking for. When I'm sharpening, I want to be able to categorize the work I'm doing, and I want to be able to make formulas or groups of work in a way that I can really focus on, okay, these are the stones for this knife, this steel, this is the technique I'm going to use, and this is how I'm going to progress and how I'm going to go about doing this certain job. And for me, that's always what I've been looking for a long time, because it's really the technique that I want to focus on. I don't really want to be worrying about the stone's problems. So with NSK, not only did solve a lot of the problems I had before, but working directly with NSK, I'm able to curate the stones I'm using to match exactly what I want to do. And at the same time, NSK is continually always improving their products and always introducing new ideas to solve problems, rather than just kind of being stagnant with one line. Everything's always improving and moving forward. So over the years, my sharpening techniques and ideas and actually the work I do has changed a lot. I don't really do repairs anymore. Mainly what I'm doing now is refinishing blades for customers on knives that are more for collecting, I would say, and also knives directly from Blacksmith to make products or prototypes for new products, or to just do polishing work for blacksmiths or sword makers that are making kitchen knives. So probably 90% of the work I'm doing is polishing based, right, or focused. And where I was many years ago, I kind of couldn't really imagine that I could get to this level of technique at the time. Not only with synthetic sharpening or the sharpening that I'm doing or the work I do with NSK, but also in natural stone sharpening. So sharpening for me has always been a kind of journey to try to reach a certain type of perfection that probably I'll never reach. Over the years, I've probably developed and used more techniques than I can actually probably remember. And I've been one to actually collect stuff. I do have a lot of stones, as you can see, but actually the amount of stones that I have used and gone through and either given away or just don't use anymore is a lot. Everything that I'm using now is really for a specific reason and a specific goal in mind to achieve very specific results. Now, sharpening globally is very, very different from how it was in the early 2000s. Now, to do hand sharpening on natural stones to achieve a very fine finish is actually extremely common, which is incredible. And it's incredible to see the work that people are doing, because there's so many incredible sharpeners around the world. For me, it's a strange thing. I always just feel that I'm not good enough, or I'm not getting what I want. So this continuous goal, this continuous journey will continue on. Right now, with what I'm doing and the work that I'm doing, I'm pretty comfortable and actually more so confident than I've ever been before. That I can actually visualize and really see what is possible to achieve in the type of sharpening and the direction I want to go in. So that was a brief overview of my sharpening experience and a bit of history and kind of where I was and how I got to where I am now. We are going to continue to move forward, developing new ideas and techniques and stones with NSK. And I've also got quite a few interesting things. We're working with a lot of different makers, swordsmiths, and some other blacksmiths, and we're working on some really unique projects that maybe you've seen in some previous videos. And we're making some really interesting, we've got a lot of interesting ideas moving forward. So if you like kind of what we're doing and you want to see more and you want other details about some of the stuff I've talked about today, please subscribe and let me know in the comments below on kind of what you'd like to see as we kind of keep on moving forward in this long sharpening journey. So after reintroducing myself to NSK, I was a bit
You don't have to use the word.
It makes sense to.
Okay, try.
So after reintroducing myself to NSK, I was a bit skeptical on how they would